Abra Cadaver is proof that revenge is a dish best served cold. Dead cold. Directed by Stephen Hopkins, written by Jim Burge, shot by Levi Isaacs, and music by Alan Silvestri. Based on the story Dead Right from Tales from the Crypt number 37. This freaky fable introduces us to a macabre medical theory, and then makes you live, or die, through it. Brothers Martin and Carl Fairbanks are medical students. Marty shows great talent as a surgeon, and he has a far-out theory that the brain can stay alive long after the body dies, while the younger Carl doesn't take his work seriously. One night, Carl needs his older brother's help in the morgue. While looking over the bodies, the two debate Martin's theory. When inspecting a female corpse, she springs to life, screaming and attacking Martin. Another body jumps and gives Carl a shock. But this is all a ruse. A little birthday prank for Marty. Everyone is there for a good time, but the fright was too much for Martin, as he falls to the ground, suffering a stroke. In the comic, Doctors Winston and Fairbanks are longtime friends, ever since they met in medical school. Neither of them had ever married, and since they both have no close relatives, they are each other's benefactor in the event of either of their deaths. Now in their older years, they make it a point to visit each other every Friday night. A common discussion of theirs is to argue over Fairbanks' theory that it is possible for the human brain to stay alive after the heart stops, that the body can still see, hear, and feel for hours, maybe even days. The fantastic nature of this theory upsets Dr. Winston week after week. Years after the birthday incident, Carl is a successful surgeon. Martin, now partially paralyzed, is relegated to medical research, dependent on his brother's funding. Funding that is at risk of being cut off if he doesn't start showing some results, or at least takes a teaching position that Carl pulled some strings to get him. Marty does have something to show his brother. He offers him a drink and shows what he's been up to since coming back from a trip to Haiti. But Marty only enrages Carl when he reveals that all the money for endorphin research has actually been going to his old wild theory about brain life after clinical death. This is the last straw for Carl. He's cutting his brother off, but not before Marty gets his revenge.
This is it, Martin. It's over. As far as I'm concerned, I've paid my debt to you. Have a nice life.
You have a nice death. What's it feel like, Carl? When your heart seizes on you.
Martin poisoned Carl's drink. As Carl falls helpless to the floor, Marty gives him a shot of D-animator serum. One Friday, things are a little different for Fairbanks and Winston. Fairbanks doesn't bring up his death theory at all. Instead, he informs Winston that he is bankrupt and in desperate need of money. Winston offers to lend him whatever he needs, but that won't do. Fairbanks will be taking everything Winston has, for he has poisoned his drink, and the poison works fast. Dr. Winston drops dead, except he can see his friend leaning over him, and he can hear him call the Undertaker, and confess that he never believed his own theories. He was merely trying to get the old man upset enough to cause a heart attack and die. Dr. Winston is frozen in place, well aware of his surroundings, but unable to move, or blink, or speak. He's just there, dead. Martin opens his brother's eyes and asks him how it feels being dead. Carl tells Martin he's not dead, but a quick reading from the EKG machine says otherwise. Total flatline. Carl is officially dead, but he can still see, still hear, and still feel.
Oh no! I can't be dead.
You're flatline, clinically dead, but you can still see, you can still hear, and you can still feel.
Shit. My heart.
But take heart, little brother.
I can't hear it beating.
My research indicates that touch is the first sense to go.
Ben the Undertaker arrives and helps Dr. Fairbanks lift the deceased Dr. Winston into a casket. Winston describes to us how he feels and hears everything, how he is surrounded by darkness once the casket is closed. He feels himself being lifted onto a table. Despite feeling the needle being inserted into his arm, there is no pain. His blood is drained and embalming fluid begins filling his body. Dr. Fairbanks informs Ben that he wants the cheapest coffin possible for his once colleague. Winston is so insulted by this that he could scream. If he weren't dead, that is. Martin wheels Carl's body over to Mitch at the medical school, in the very same room as that fateful night all those years ago. And into the meat locker he goes. Mitch and Marty hang Carl on a meat hook. Thankfully, Carl has lost his sense of touch. Marty leaves him there overnight, alone with his thoughts. Too bad for his body, the hook doesn't hold. Dr. Winston hears his own funeral through the coffin. He feels being driven and plunked down into the ground, the shoveled dirt hitting the top of the coffin. Suddenly, the sounds stop and are replaced with the laughter of Dr. Fairbanks and Ben. The two open the coffin and reveal this was all a joke, to fool Winston into believing Fairbanks' theory. They never even left his home. Fairbanks merely slipped a new anesthetic into Winston's drink, one that causes temporary paralysis, and it should be wearing off now. Dr. Winston feels the rising sun on his face, and hears the screams of his friend. Dr. Fairbanks will never know how correct his theory is until he succumbs to death someday, for Dr. Winston died of a heart attack before Ben even arrived. Mitch comes back in the morning and has some fun with the body before turning to business. Carl is on the embalming table and he gets to watch the blood leave his body. Martin stops in to let Carl know that he ended up taking the teaching job, and Carl is going to be part of his first lesson. Marty is about to cut through the skull when Carl's fingers begin to move, but the saw starts cutting as Carl can only panic in his mind. As Marty finally rips the brain out, Carl springs up, screaming for dear life. Everyone around him is laughing. It was all an elaborate prank by Marty with the help of his research team.
Alive?
Very much alive. Yes. Oh, you had a heart attack, all right. You were clinically dead. The stuff I put into your drink induced it. But you were never in danger.
Oh, my God.
How about
Pretty
This is what I injected into you. It's what I was working on, what you were paying for. I call it suspensor. In the event of catastrophic injury or heart failure, it preserves brain function just like it preserved yours. And over the course of a few hours, it wears off.
Carl and Marty finally patch things up after all these years. Unfortunately, the celebration is cut short. Carl is having a heart attack, for real this time. Marty and his team do everything they can to save him, but to Carl's horror, Marty's theory of continued brain function after death is true.
Hey, hand me that epidermal saw, will you?
Yeah, sure. Here it is at last. My autopsy. God damn you, Marty, you are absolutely right. Except about one thing. The sense of touch. It isn't the first thing to go, it's the last. Abra Cadaver has the unique honor of being the first episode of Tales from the Crypt I've ever seen. I remember watching a syndicated rerun with my older brother as the two of us sat in our parents' basement. My most vivid memory of the episode is that it was my first taste of seeing black and white film being used to establish another time period, before switching to color for present day. Most of the horror comes from Carl and Winston narrating their thoughts to us. Forcing a meat hook into a dead body feels very different from forcing a meat hook into a dead body that can talk to the audience. It's a ghoulish point of view that goes to show no cruel joke goes unrewarded. You'll be dying to watch this one again and again. Shit isn't the first thing to go, it's the last. Ah!